Frank. Just hold that. Hey, settle down, Frank. It's not a building site. It's not a building site, mate. It's a public building. It's time to talk. Have you been ordering people to threaten? I don't threaten anybody.
Do this to families, and he just doesn't care.
But you warned me. About $120,000.
Basically, Maxtra was just single-handedly like a corkscrew, just slowly tighten the screws around my neck and just suck me dry.
It's the dark side of the construction industry. Tradies and subcontractors who just want a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. But in some cases we've investigated, there is no payday. But tradies claim there is payback. Thugs, threats, fear and financial ruin.
I lost $250,000 with Maxtra.
Financially ruined me.
When I've had to remortgage my wife's house to pay bills that belong to him.
I didn't have a mortgage, and now I do, and now I work 14 hours a day, 6 days a week.
We know it's a hard game, the building industry, but it doesn't get much harder than tradies and their families on the brink. The man they want answers from is the building boss who drives a Bentley, Frank NADINIC. What's your reputation in the building industry?
I think I've got a good reputation. I'm a good builder.
You've got a terrible reputation,
Well, that's
Frank.
your opinion.
No, it's not my opinion. It's the opinion of a lot of people. Frank NADINIC is involved with the company Maxtra. He's not the director anymore. He's bestowed that upon his son, Andrew. He drives a Maserati. Frank is big league and Maxtra is a big builder. $45 million a year. Operates in 2 states, Victoria and New South Wales. From city buildings to suburban sports pavilions, Maxtra has left its mark. Or should we say, its dark stain. Frank. Martin King, mate, from Channel 9, how are you?
All right.
You're causing carnage in the building industry, Frank.
I don't agree with you.
With Maxtra.
I don't agree with you.
Well, why would you say that?
Well, why am I causing...
The evidence is there, mate. You don't pay subcontractors.
No, it's not true.
Or you pay them very little.
It's not true.
We've spoken to at least 15.
I think it's absolutely disgraceful. I mean...
John Setka, head of the powerful Construction, Forestry, Mining and Energy Union. It's a rare day he fronts a camera, but, as he says...
Look, it's time to talk. It's time for all these subcontractors to actually stand up and sort of band together and get what's rightfully theirs. And no one should work for nothing.
John, how much trouble has the industry had with Maxtra?
Oh, lots of trouble, Martin. They're a serial offender. They're notorious for not paying their bills and not paying subcontractors. And the union has had a lot of trouble with Maxtra. We've spent a lot of resources in chasing money for people that Maxtra owe money to. And it's just got to the point where it's just absolutely ridiculous.
We've spoken to at least 15 subcontractors.
Listen, you haven't got my permission to
and
film
tradies.
this. You haven't got my permission to film
I don't need your permission. I don't need your permission to film, Frank. This is Team NADINIC, Father Frank and son Andrew. They build buildings and they've built quite a reputation. Whether they like it or not, whether they've caused it or not, that you don't toy with the Maxtra boys. They're religious about being litigious. There's court cases, caveats on homes, and claims some subcontractors in dispute with Maxtra, visits to homes by third parties, and they're not there for tea and scones.
As though he's having my family threatened.
So what happened there?
Basically, they've put the heavies on me.
Well, I've had people come around our house, personal home, knocking on the door, threatening us. And I know of other people, other subbies who have also been threatened by Frank.
Sorry?
By Frank.
Threatened by Frank?
Well, by Frank's people.
What about these threats a lot of the subbies have been getting, subcontractors?
Who's been getting threats?
Have you been ordering people to threaten?
I don't threaten anybody.
And put fear into people?
Not at all.
Some of the people we've spoken to are
I
living
suggest he's lying to you.
No, it's more than one. We've spoken to quite a few subcontractors, and some of them say that they're frightened of Frank. Are you aware of that?
Yes, look, I've heard the stories. I've heard stories about people being threatened. Other people using all sorts of intimidation.
What do you think of that?
Well, I just think it's absolutely just disgraceful. I mean, disgusting. I mean, you imagine you've worked, you haven't been paid for it, you stand to lose your house, so you're chasing money that is rightfully yours, and then you get threatened for it. I mean, I don't think there's anything worse.
Many sleepless nights, yeah.
This subcontractor says he's scared. He claims he's almost $400,000 out of pocket because of Maxtra. We've agreed not to identify him.
I'm left with a big bill. Maxtra's driving around in Maseratis.
Talk to tradies like Glazier Mick Hogan, and they tell a similar story of debts so huge they're life-changing. He says Maxtra owes him $116,000. Maxtra denies this, claiming they advanced him money which he failed to repay, and say he breached their contract by walking off the job.
I had six employees working for me. I put them off. I've tried to get my business up and running again, but it's to no avail. You just can't. A small business like mine, which I've created from nothing, worked out the back of my ute, built my reputation up, got a good name in the business.
Mick is involved in a complex legal action with Maxtra. He lost round one in the Supreme Court, a judgment against him of almost $140,000. So you're stressed, you're exhausted?
Yep, I was stressed, I got depression.
Other subbies claim they're owed frightening amounts of money. Electrician Joe Carrack.
$233,000.
Cabinet maker John Floria.
About $250,000.
Plumber Michael McGeary.
About $120,000. I didn't see any of that.
Isabel, how did this affect you?
Well, it was very hard seeing Michael being so stressful. Couldn't sleep.
I got sick.
He got very sick, yes, and I blame him for it.
This is Frank's company history, a confusing cluster of entities, directors and family members. We'll keep it simple and focus on three construction companies. Royal Como and Andeco both went belly up. The most recent building company linked to Frank is Maxtra Constructions, of which he is a former director. His son Andrew is the current director. Over the past 20 years, these three companies have had some startling similarities with their directors. With Royal Como, the director was Frank NADINIC, born in Zadar, Croatia. Okay, so he's Croatian. And the principal executive officer was Frane NADINIC, born in Serbia. With Andeco, the director was Frank NADINIC, who was born in Melbourne. Okay, so he's an Aussie. And finally, with Maxtra, the previous director was Frank NADINIC, born in Sukosan, Croatia. So a man named Frank NADINIC, the director, not to mention Frane NADINIC, appears to have been born in at least three different places. 2 towns in Croatia, Melbourne, Australia, and possibly a town in Serbia. And they were all born on the very same day, the 1st of October, 1952. Bit of a phantom, the old Frank. You've been bankrupt?
I've been unfortunate in my business, telling absolutely I've lost everything. What? Because of other people, of what they've done to me.
Oh, is it so? It's all about you, is it?
No, not at all.
Well, what they'll generally do, they'll go to a project, they'll undercut the project or underbid it by, if everyone else is coming in at, for example, say at $10 million, they might come in at 9. Some developer says, oh, gee, that's a good price, I'll grab him. And how he sort of makes the money up is by ripping off the subbies. He just doesn't pay people. He rips them off. If someone's owed $500,000, he might only give them $250,000 if they're lucky. And you do that to 20, 30 subcontractors, you've more than made up the $1 million.
The CFMEU, the union, says your behaviour is disgraceful. Do you think your behaviour is disgraceful?
I don't know what you're talking about.
And what about your luxury cars? That really sticks in the craw. of all of these subcontractors and their families that you've got the Bentleys and your son's got the Maserati. You might even have a Porsche, do you, Frank, as well? You've also got a bicycle as well. This is a Maxtra building site in Carlton in Melbourne. These are subcontractors and tradies walking off the job in protest at not being paid. What would you say to these subcontractors who you're not paying?
I don't employ subcontractors. It's not. I don't have a duty to pay contractors that I'm employed. I don't want
You sign contracts. Maxtra signs contracts with them.
Yeah, I'm not Maxtra.
No, your son's Maxtra.
Oh, yeah, he is. So maybe you need to talk to him about it.
And this is how this operates, doesn't it?
We were doing plumbing contracts for Frank through a company that he had at that stage. It was NADINIC. At first, it was quite harmonious, but after a while things turned sour as payments became further and further drawn out.
Michael was working for Frank's company and Deco. That 120 grand, he says, has now turned into $170,000 with costs and interest. In effect, Michael says he worked for nothing.
Well, that's true.
So how long did you work for nothing?
Well, we'd have to look at it probably a couple of years.
Settle down, Frank. It's not a building site. It's not a building site, mate. It's a public building.
Can you go away?
Oh, fair enough, man. Okay, mate. Yeah, so it's Frank.
It's almost made so easy for them. They can just, without skipping a heartbeat, they can just sink one company, start another one if up in a few weeks, and just keep going along their merry way and leaving a whole trail of destruction.
The tradies are trapped, but Maxtra has one beautiful escape hatch in the contract, clause 7.9, titled No Discontinuance.
The subcontractor must not discontinue the works or otherwise alter the scheduling or programming of the works without Maxtra's written consent. There is no matter or event which will exonerate the subcontractor from its obligations on no discontinuance.
So there you have it, the catch-22 of all catch-22s. Walk off the job because you're not being paid and you breach your contract. Stay on the job and don't get paid. No trade-off for these tradies.
Yeah, you can't win. And all they do is they just throw heaps of money at their lawyers and just lawyer up.
For Sparky Joe, who claims Maxtra owes him $233,000, it gets worse.
Well, I've had to release 6 of my staff, including the office girl, who did all my paperwork.
All up, more than $330,000. If that's not enough, Joe claims a scary-looking male paid a home visit with a threat.
It was made to my wife, who was at home by herself, not to pursue any legal matter regarding the outstanding money.
Your wife with cancer?
That's correct.
What was your wife's reaction?
She was petrified, she was crying, she was scared to walk out the door for the next 2 weeks.
So, Frank, why should people live in fear? All they want to do is a fair day's work for a fair day's pay. And they do a deal with you, and they say all they get from you is trickery.
But who is all they? Name one
subcontractors. Are you scared of Frank?
Yes.
And it causes a lot of damage and a lot of grief for a lot of families. And when you see people's kids having to go without, with their wives, because someone's ripped them off and they're driving around in a Bentley, I'm very passionate about it. I think it's absolutely disgraceful.
He might have ruined my business, but he hasn't ruined my spirit. Thanks to my wife showing me the way, what spirit really is. I'll keep boxing on. It's the Australian way. It's the only way we know.